The Haunted Commercial Hotel, a horror story. The old van rumbled along the deserted road, the headlights barely cutting through the thick fog that seemed to swallow everything in its path. Inside, 4 teenagers, Sarah, Jake, Emily, and Tom, were buzzing with excitement, their nerves tingling with anticipation.
I can't believe we're actually doing this,
Sarah said, her voice a mix of excitement and fear. Her dark hair fell in waves around her face as she glanced at the map in her lap.
Why not?
Jake grinned from the driver's seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel.
This place is supposed to be the real deal. Murders, ghosts, even a mad scientist. It's gonna be epic!
Emily, sitting in the back with Tom, shivered.
I heard they never wash the sheets, like ever, and we're supposed to bring our own because, well, you know.
She trailed off, her cheeks flushing slightly.
Because the hotel was a brothel or something, right?
Tom chimed in, his voice teasing.
We're all adults here. We can handle a few dirty sheets.
Sarah shot him a look.
It's not just that, Tom. They said the place is cursed. People go missing, and some of them never leave.
Jake chuckled, trying to keep the mood light.
That's why we're here, isn't it? To see if we can handle it. What's the worst that could happen?
They all laughed, but there was an edge to it, a nervousness that none of them wanted to acknowledge. As they approached the hotel, a towering Gothic structure that loomed out of the fog like a nightmare made real, the laughter died in their throats. The hotel's lobby was dimly lit, with flickering candles casting long shadows on the worn, blood-red carpet. The receptionist, a thin, gaunt man with sunken eyes, greeted them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes.
Welcome to the commercial hotel,
he said in a voice that sent shivers down Sarah's spine.
I trust you'll find your stay unforgettable.
Jake stepped forward, trying to appear confident.
We have reservations. 4 rooms.
The receptionist nodded, his eyes lingering a little too long on each of them.
Yes, of course. But first, we need to know, are you sure you want to stay here? Once you check in, there's no turning back.
Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but Jake just laughed it off.
We're here for the full experience. Let's do this.
The receptionist's smile widened.
Very well. Enjoy your stay.
As they filled out the paperwork, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were signing more than just a registration form. They were signing away their lives. A bellhop appeared as if from nowhere, his uniform crisp, but his eyes hollow. He took the bags with a bow that was almost mocking.
Follow me, please,
he said, his voice low and oily. As they walked down the long, dim corridors, the bellhop began to speak in a slow, deliberate manner.
The locker rooms are just down the hall if you wish to change your clothes. I guarantee no one will be watching.
The way he said it made Sarah's skin crawl. It wasn't a reassurance, it was a warning. Emily squeezed Sarah's hand.
What do you think he means by that? I don't want to know.
Sarah whispered back. They reached their rooms and the bellhop handed out the keys with a smirk.
Sleep tight,
he said, lingering for a moment before he finally disappeared down the hall. Tom rolled his eyes.
This place is really leaning into the whole haunted vibe.
Jake nodded, though his bravado seemed a bit forced.
Yeah, it's all part of the act.
But deep down, they all knew it was more than just an act. Later that night, unable to sleep, the group decided to explore the hotel. The halls were eerily quiet, the only sound being the creak of the floorboards under their feet.
Let's see if we can find anything spooky,
Jake suggested, trying to keep the mood light. They wandered through the labyrinth corridors until they came to a locked door.
What do you think is in there?
Emily asked, her voice trembling. Tom, ever the curious one, jimmied the lock open with a credit card. The door creaked open to reveal a room straight out of a nightmare. Jars of preserved body fluids lined the shelves, and strange, alien-like creatures floated in tubes with green liquid.
Oh no!
Sarah gasped, backing away in horror. Jake picked up the dusty journal from a desk in a corner.
This is a lab. A mad scientist lab.
They quickly scanned the journal, discovering entries about experiments on humans and opening portals to other dimensions. The scientist had unleashed a virus that had infected the hotel's staff, turning them into something not quite human.
We need to get out of here,
Emily whispered, her voice quivering. But as they turned to leave, a faint glow caught Jake's eye.
Wait, look at this.
In the corner of the room, a shimmering portal was partially open, a demonic figure halfway through, snarling and thrashing as if trying to break free. Before they could react, the portal's pull grew stronger, dragging them all into its vortex. The teens landed on the hard ground, disoriented and terrified. They found themselves in a barren wasteland, the sky a sickly yellow, the air thick with the stench of decay. All around them, the undead staggered and groaned, their eyes lifeless, their bodies twisted and broken.
We need to move, now!
Jake shouted, pulling Sarah to her feet. They ran, dodging the grasping hands of the undead, but the wasteland seemed to stretch on forever. Just when they thought they couldn't run any further, they spotted a building in the distance.
Maybe we can hide in there.
Emily panted, her eyes wide with fear. The building was strange, with neon-colored doors lining the walls of a long corridor. Each door led to a different disorienting room, and as they tried to find their way out, they heard footsteps behind them. A figure emerged from the shadows, an undead hunter, armed to the teeth, but instead of helping them, he eyed them suspiciously.
You're infected.
He growled, raising his weapon.
I can't let you leave.
What? We're not.
Tom protested, but the hunter was relentless. A deadly game of cat and mouse ensued, the teens fleeing down the corridors, bursting through door after door in a desperate bid for survival. They finally escaped down a long hallway, only to encounter a pair of eerie zombie twins standing silently at the end. They bolted through the nearest exit, finding themselves in a dense, spider-infested forest. The trees were draped with thick webs, and the air buzzed with the sound of giant spiders scuttling through the underbrush.
This can't be happening.
Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their pounding hearts. As they stumbled through the forest, they came upon a decrepit cabin. Desperate for shelter, they made their way inside, only to be confronted by horrors even worse than those outside. The cabin's door creaked open, revealing an undead figure chained to the post outside. As the teens approached, the figure snarled and tore at its chains, managing to rip off its own arms in its frenzy to reach them. They barely made it inside, slamming the door shut behind them, but the cabin offered little comfort. Inside, the walls were lined with instruments of torture, and skeletal remains lay scattered across the floor.
We have to keep moving.
Jake urged, though his voice betrayed his fear. But the cabin was a labyrinth of horrors, and soon they found themselves face to face with a towering 14-foot zombie, its massive form blocking their only exit. The zombie roared, its voice shaking the walls as it chased them through the narrow corridors. They fled into a mortuary, where mourners with hollow, lifeless eyes stood vigil over a coffin. A woman, her face streaked with tears, clutched her own severed head, her sobs filling the room. The teens backed away in horror, only to be attacked by an undead dog, its jaws snapping at their heels. They fled further into the building, but the giant zombie was relentless. It crashed through the ceiling, its massive hands grasping for them as they tried to squeeze past its bulk to escape. The teens burst into a morgue, the air cold and oppressive. The undead stirred in their drawers, the metal rattling as they fought to break free. The teens moved quickly, but their progress was halted by a terrifying sight. A girl, contorted and spider-like, climbing the walls and ceiling. Emily screamed as the girl lunged at them, but Jake pulled her out of the way just in time. They ran, the exorcist-like creature chasing them through the narrow hallways until they finally escaped her grasp. Exhausted and terrified, the teens stumbled into the open, where a man, seemingly normal, offered to lead them to safety.
Follow me.
He urged, his voice calm and reassuring.
We'll be safe if we can get to the cemetery.
But their relief was short-lived. As they made their way through the darkened streets, a werewolf appeared out of nowhere, tearing into the man with savage ferocity. His dying words were a warning to head for the graveyard. The cemetery was a maze of tombstones and mausoleums, the air thick with fog and the scent of decay. As they navigated the graves, a ghoul emerged from one of the tombs, its bony fingers reaching for them. In their panic, they stumbled into a nearby circus tent, hoping for refuge, but the circus was no sanctuary. Inside, they were greeted by Bubbles, a clown whose cheerful demeanor quickly turned sinister.
What's the matter? You don't like clowns?
Bubbles asked, her voice dripping with malice. The teens backed away, but Bubbles wasn't alone. A horde of undead clowns emerged from the shadows, their painted faces twisted into grotesque grins. They ran through the circus, dodging clowns and navigating rooms filled with haunted dolls and distorted furniture that defied gravity. The world around them seemed to warp and bend, reality slipping away as they fought to escape. At last, they were ushered into a small, dark room, where a fortune teller waited for them. She smiled, her eyes gleaming with hidden knowledge.
I can help you return home.
She said, her voice soothing.
All I need to do is read your fortune.
The teens, desperate for a way out, agreed. But as she began to read, the room shook violently. The walls creaked and crumbled around them.
The building is coming down!
The fortune teller crackled, her voice rising above the chaos.
You're all gonna die!
In a last desperate effort, the teens scrambled for the exit, narrowly escaping as the walls collapsed behind them. As they emerged from the rubble, they found themselves back in the haunted hotel. The fortune teller, now eerily calm, stood before them.
Welcome back. And remember, the sheets have never been washed.
The teens found themselves in the hotel's laundry room, where the air was thick with the stench of mold and rot. Filthy sheets hung from the ceiling, blocking their path. Every touch of the fabric left blisters and boils on their skin, burning like acid. They pushed through, finally emerging into the kitchen where the butcher, a small, unnerving woman, was hard at work. The meat on her cutting board was unmistakably human, and she looked up at them with a hungry gleam in her eyes.
I've been waiting for fresh meat.
She whispered, her voice sending shivers down their spines. They bolted from the kitchen, desperate to escape the horrors that seemed to multiply with every turn. Breathless and battered, the teens finally returned to the reception desk. The same gaunt receptionist from the night before was waiting for them, his smile as cold and unsettling as ever.
Did you enjoy your stay?
He asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
You may check out now.
The teens didn't wait for a response. They hurried out of the hotel, the door slamming shut behind them. They stumbled out onto the dark, empty street, the hotel looming ominously behind them. Relief washed over them as they saw a pair of headlights in the distance, a taxi, finally, to take them away from this nightmare. But the relief was short-lived. The taxi didn't slow down. It accelerated, its headlights blinding as it bore down on them. They screamed, but there was no time to react. The taxi plowed into them, their bodies crumpling under the impact. The final scene lingered on a photograph hanging in the hotel's lobby, a picture of the teens, smiling and carefree, taken just before they left for their trip. Now, they were just another part of the haunted commercial hotel's dark and twisted history.